So they started off season 3 of Invincible by talking about how strong has Mark grown. Speed increased by 65%, endurance by 73%, and by far the most impressive, strength by 138%. Wow, it seems like Mark has gotten pretty strong from the previous seasons. He actually might be invincible now. But wait, Doc Seismic seems to be attacking. With his enhanced superpowers, he's sure to beat Doc Seismic now, right? Right? Well, look for yourselves.
Bruh.
Pretty rough, right? I don't know if it's just me or not, but I don't think Mark got very strong. In fact, to me, it seems he has stayed the same or even gotten weaker, because he beat Doc Seismic before. But let's go back a little bit to how things got here, and break down exactly what happened in those first 3 episodes of Invincible. Because if you're anything like me, those 3 episodes went by in a flash, and we need more right now. So it all started when Mark was training, and he suddenly got a report that someone was stealing the Declaration of Independence. So with Rex, he heads off to save the day and to test out his new strength. But when he gets there, he sees that the villains are just ordinary people. He just starts flexing his newfound superpowers to people who can't even throw a punch. But wham, Paul, Duplicate's brother, shows up and starts beating the life out of Rex for allegedly killing his sister. So I'm like, finally, Mark is gonna start using his full potential and beat up Paul, which he indeed does. But before he can finish off the rest of the Paul clones, Duplicate and Immortal show up. And they're like, hey, so we aren't dead. And then Rex absolutely loses it because he's pretty beat up and Paul gets arrested. Oh yeah, the people that robbed the Declaration of Independence did get away, which is pretty bad, but yeah, great job, Mark. Totally used your full potential here. So after Kate and Immortal come back, they link up with the rest of the Guardians and they're like, hey, we back and married. And they're like, yippee. And in the meantime, Mark's not having the best of the day, really months. He finds out that his little brother from his dad's affair now has superpowers and he lied about it. So now he promised Oliver, his brother, to use his powers, so there's that. And then there's the internal struggle within him on whether or not he's gonna ask out Eve, which becomes very apparent that night when he's out with William and his boyfriend. So William's like,
man, you should definitely ask out Eve. Like, she's into you and you're into her. It's all gonna work out.
And then Mark's like, yeah, I definitely should. But do I tell her that the older version of her told me to do that, even though I loved her since the beginning? And then William's like,
Mark, don't do that. That's just gonna make everything really awkward.
So Mark agrees and meets up with Eve the next day. And they start talking about how Oliver has superpowers, and then Mark finally brings it up in the most awkward way possible. But thanks to the power of love, Eve becomes his girlfriend. But then he starts talking about how the older version of Eve told him to do this. And the current Eve totally freaks out and breaks up with him. Bro didn't even last a minute with Eve before the breakup. This has to be a record or something. But anyways, while they're both arguing, Mark gets a call that Doc Seismic broke out of prison, so they go to rescue the day. And we all know how that goes. Mark gets pretty beat up, like pretty bad for someone that calls himself invincible. But then Cecil brings out the backup, the big guns, knockoff Batman and the reanimated corpses. This is pretty bad because knockoff Batman was murdering a bunch of people back in his city. And the reanimated corpses were made by this evil scientist that murdered a bunch of college students to develop his tech, including William's boyfriend. So after the fight, Mark was pretty mad at Cecil for doing this and letting the bad guys free, so he rushes over to him. And Cecil reveals his entire plan for taking down Mark if he ever turns on humanity, which I think is pretty dumb, because Mark was only mad about letting the evil guys free. So I'm not really sure why you would expose your plan to somebody who's really strong on how to defeat them. But alas, Cecil sends the corpses after Mark's, and he goes over to the Guardians. The Guardians help out, and now Mark's free. After this, the Guardians get into a huge argument, and they break up like the Avengers did in Civil War. And after the fight, Mark goes to meet up with his mother, Oliver, and Eve. And while he explains what's going on, Oliver starts to show no remorse for death and actively wants to kill Cecil. But that's not gonna go anywhere, right? Anyways, moving on, Mark and Eve get to talking and Mark fumbles the bag yet again and gets friend-zoned. Talk about the fumble of a century. So not wanting to take no for an answer, Mark asks to meet up with Eve the next evening and takes her out to the bridge, which is a pretty weird place to hang out, but you do you, Mark. And he starts telling her, hey Eve, I really love you. And it isn't the old you that made me feel like this. During the fight today, the only thing I could think about is you, and nothing will ever change the way I feel. I love you, Eve. And then he's like, you know what, Mark? You're not that bad yourself. I guess I love you too. And then they start kissing. Because I'm not gonna lie, if I was getting beat up like that, I wouldn't be thinking about anything except how much my body was hurting. But I guess Invincible's been through this, so he's a little bit different. Moving on to one of Mark's other relationships, Oliver. So Mark starts training Oliver as per his promise. But one day, Oliver secretly follows Mark to one of his fights. While Oliver doesn't get too seriously hurt, he does get reprimanded and promises to never do that again. But what do you know, the next fight they go to, Oliver jumps in yet again to save the day and kill the bad guys. And in the process, he gets electrocuted and falls unconscious. This causes Mark to go into God mode and pretty much ends the fight in an instant. He then pulls Oliver by the ear and drags him home. In the meantime, Mark's mom is out on a date and pretty much outs the fact that Mark and Oliver have superpowers and Nolan is Omni-Man. This makes Mark pretty angry, but he'll get over that. So the next day, Oliver is grounded and Mark sees on the news that the Mauler twins, my most favorite villains, are out doing some damage. So being the kind person Mark is, he goes to fight them. Once Oliver sees that his big bro is out fighting, he runs after Mark as well. At first, Mark's a little hesitant to let Oliver fight, but the Mauler twins launch this nuclear missile, so he lets Oliver handle the twins while he takes care of the missile. So Mark flies up, explodes the missile in space, and starts coming back down. But back on Earth, Oliver goes on an absolute killing rampage, killing one of the Mauler twins. And when the other one begs for mercy, he uppercuts his head, ripping his head out. While all this is happening, what's left of the Guardians of the Globe are all surprised, especially Immortal. And after all of this happens, Oliver starts gaslighting everybody into thinking he did it by accident and he didn't know how to control his powers. That's when Mark shows up once again and pulls Oliver home by the ear. However, this time Oliver flies away, thinking he's so strong. But, he's no match for Invincible, so he gets stopped. That's when he reveals that he doesn't care if people die and they should die and no one else matters. This breaks Mark's heart because that's exactly what Omni-Man thought. So Mark and his mother talk to Oliver and hopefully sway his opinion back to thinking humanity's worth saving. But that's when Mark realizes that he's being spied on. But that's for the next episode. But let's take a look at what the Guardians and Eve were up to this entire time. So the ones that left the Guardians moved back into the Teen Titans place. And I'm not gonna lie, Rudy said some sus things, but I'm not sure if they mean anything yet, so I'll let them be for now. Moving on to Eve's day, she met up with Amber, who just so happened to go to the same college as her. So they started talking, and soon enough, she had to spill the beans that she's not dating Mark. And for those of you who don't know, Amber was Mark's ex, so awkward. But it actually turned out to be okay, because she knew everything, and everything was fine. Moving on, she actually went back to live with her parents, and right now she's actually doing a pretty good job in trying to repair her relationship with them. So that's pretty much all that happened in the first 3 episodes. So if you liked the video and thought it brought a smile to your face, please do consider liking the video and subscribing, and you might just see me make another video for episode 4. Goodbye, guys.